I've been working as a night security guard at the Ashford Museum of Natural History in Chicago for 7 years. In that time, I've dealt with false alarms, attempted break-ins, a few drunk idiots trying to impress dates after hours, and one memorable incident with a raccoon that got into the ventilation system. Nothing unusual for a night security job at a major museum. Nothing that would make you question reality. Let me back up. My name is Marcus Webb, I'm 41 years old, and I genuinely love my job. I've always been a night owl, and I've always loved museums, the quiet, the history, the sense of being surrounded by centuries of human knowledge. Working night security here is perfect for me. I walk the halls, check the exhibits, make sure everything is secure, and I get paid to spend my nights surrounded by dinosaur fossils and ancient artifacts. Most people would find it creepy. I find it peaceful. The museum has 12 galleries spread across 3 floors. Egyptian artifacts in Gallery 1, North American wildlife in Gallery 2, dinosaur fossils in Gallery 3. You get the idea. Each gallery has its own character, its own feeling. I know them all intimately after 7 years of walking through them 5 nights a week. 6 weeks ago, they opened Gallery 7. It's on the 2nd floor, in a wing that's been closed for renovations for the past 2 years. The museum acquired a major collection from a closed institution in Boston, the Blackwood Institute of Anthropological Studies. The Blackwood was a private museum that had been operating since 1897, focusing on artifacts from indigenous cultures around the world. When it closed last year due to financial problems, our museum bought the entire collection. Thousands of items, many of them quite rare. Gallery 7 was designed to showcase the best pieces from this collection. I got a preview during the day before it opened, and I have to admit, it was impressive. Tribal masks from Papua New Guinea, ceremonial clothing from various Native American tribes, ritual objects from African cultures, shamanistic tools from Siberia. Beautiful, historically significant items, all displayed with proper context and respect for their cultural origins. The centerpiece of the gallery is a diorama, a recreation of a shamanistic ritual scene from a Siberian indigenous group. There are 3 mannequins dressed in traditional shamanistic clothing, positioned around a fire, obviously fake, just red lights and fabric. The mannequins are incredibly detailed, with realistic faces, hair, and hands. The main shaman figure is in the center, arms raised, wearing an elaborate costume covered in bones, feathers, and bells. The other 2 figures are positioned as if they're chanting or drumming. The first night Gallery 7 was open, I did my usual rounds. Everything seemed normal. I checked the new gallery around 11 p.m., walked through, made sure all the displays were secure and the climate control was working properly. The diorama looked great, the lighting gave it an eerie but captivating atmosphere. The mannequins' faces seemed almost alive in the flickering fake firelight. I moved on to the other galleries, did my checks, returned to the security office to watch the monitors and do some paperwork. Everything normal. Around 2 a.m., one of the motion sensors in Gallery 7 triggered an alarm. This happens sometimes. The sensors are sensitive, and they can pick up vibrations from the street, sudden temperature changes, even large insects flying past. I grabbed my flashlight and headed up to check it out. When I entered Gallery 7, everything looked normal at first. All the artifacts were in place, no signs of disturbance. I walked slowly through the gallery, checking each display case, each artifact. When I reached the diorama, I paused. Something felt different. The mannequins were in slightly different positions. The main shaman's arms were lower than before. Instead of raised above his head, they were extended forward, parallel to the ground. The 2 secondary figures seemed to have turned slightly, as if they'd been facing the main shaman before and were now facing each other. I stood there, trying to remember exactly how they'd been positioned earlier. Had the arms been raised? I was pretty sure they had been. But mannequins don't move on their own. Someone must have adjusted them during the day for some reason, better lighting, better composition, whatever. Museum staff are always tweaking displays. I made a note in my log about the motion sensor alarm and continued my rounds. The next night, same thing. Motion sensor alarm in Gallery 7 around 2 a.m. I went to check, and again, the mannequins seemed different. This time, the main shaman's head was tilted to the side, and one of the secondary figures had its arms raised instead of lowered. I examined the mannequins more closely this time. They were well made but not particularly special, just standard museum mannequins with realistic faces and wigs. Their clothes were authentic artifacts from the Blackwood collection, but the figures themselves were just painted fiberglass and plastic. I checked the surveillance footage from the gallery. The camera angle didn't show the diorama clearly, it was focused more on the display cases containing smaller, more valuable items. I could see the diorama in the edge of the frame, but not in enough detail to see if the mannequins had moved. I talked to day shift security the next morning. "Hey, has anyone been adjusting the mannequins in Gallery 7? The diorama?" "Not that I know of," Jerry, the day shift supervisor, said. "Why? They seem different every night. Like someone's repositioning them." He shrugged. "Probably the curator. Dr. Hayward is real particular about the displays. She's always moving stuff around to get it just right." That made sense. I let it go. But the third night, things got weirder. The motion sensor alarm went off again at 2 a.m. I was starting to expect it. But when I entered Gallery 7 this time, I heard something. Bells. Faint, but distinct. The sound of small bells ringing, like wind chimes in a light breeze. I froze, listening. The sound was coming from the diorama. The main shaman's costume was covered in small bells, and they were moving. Ringing softly. But there was no breeze in the gallery. The air was perfectly still, temperature controlled for artifact preservation. I approached the dioramas slowly, flashlight beam steady on the mannequins. They were in different positions again, all three were now facing outward, toward the gallery, as if looking at something. Or looking for something. The bells were definitely moving. I could see them swaying gently on the shaman's costume. I reached out to touch one of the bells, to see if there was some mechanism making them move. The moment my fingers got close, all the bells stopped moving. Instantly. Complete stillness. My hand was shaking. I pulled it back and stepped away from the diorama. That's when I noticed something else. The fake fire had changed. Before, it had been red and orange lights with fabric. Now, it looked different. The light seemed to flicker in a more natural pattern, and there was a faint heat shimmer above it, like there was real heat. I put my hand near the fire. It was warm. Not hot enough to burn, but noticeably warm. That shouldn't be possible. The lights were LEDs, they didn't generate much heat. I backed out of the gallery and called my supervisor, Tom, who was in the office. "Hey, Tom, can you come to Gallery 7? Something weird is going on." He arrived 5 minutes later, looking annoyed at being pulled away from his coffee and sports radio. "What's up?" "The diorama. Something's wrong with it?" We walked to the diorama together. The bells were silent now. The fire looked normal, just lights and fabric. The mannequins were still positioned facing outward, but Tom hadn't seen them before, so he had no reason to think that was strange. "Looks fine to me," he said. "What's the problem?" The bells were ringing. And the fire was giving off heat. He felt near the fire. "It's a little warm, but LEDs do generate some heat. And the bells probably air pressure changes from the climate control system. Old building, you get weird air currents sometimes." He looked at me with concern. "You feeling okay, Marcus? You've been working a lot of nights lately. Maybe you need a few days off." "No, I'm fine." "You're probably right about the air currents." But I wasn't fine, and he wasn't right. After Tom left, I went back to the security office and pulled up all the camera feeds. I opened the Gallery 7 feed and rewound to when I'd first entered the gallery that night. I watched myself walk through the gallery, approach the diorama, reach toward the bells, then back away. On the footage, the bells weren't moving. At all. The mannequins were positioned exactly as they are now, facing outward. There was no change in the fire's appearance. But I'd seen it. I'd heard it. I'd felt the heat. I didn't sleep well that day. The fourth night, I decided to set up my own camera. I have a small action camera I use for personal stuff, hiking videos, that sort of thing. I mounted it on a tripod in Gallery 7, positioned to get a clear shot of the diorama, and set it to record continuously. Then I did my normal rounds, checking the other galleries. I kept my radio on, waiting for the motion sensor alarm from Gallery 7. It came at 1:47 a.m. I headed to Gallery 7, but this time I stood outside the entrance for a moment, listening before I went in. I heard drums. Faint but rhythmic, like the sound of distant drumming. And voices or something like voices. More like chanting, but in no language I recognized. Low, guttural sounds that seemed to resonate in my chest. I pushed through the entrance. The sound stopped immediately. The gallery was silent. The diorama was unchanged, mannequin still facing outward, fire still flickering its fake flicker. But my action camera was on the ground. Not on the tripod where I'd left it on the ground, several feet away, lens cracked. I picked it up. The camera was warm, almost hot. I pressed the playback button, but the screen was black. The camera was dead, completely non-functional. That should have been my sign to quit. To walk out and not come back. But I'm stubborn, and I don't believe in supernatural nonsense. There had to be a rational explanation. I set up a new camera the next night. This time, I used one of the museum's own security cameras, repositioned to focus exclusively on the diorama. I also put tape on the floor around each mannequin's base, so I could definitively tell if they moved. Fifth night. Motion alarm at 2:03 a.m. I pulled up the security feed on my phone as I walked to Gallery 7. I could see the diorama on the screen. As I watched, the main shaman mannequin's head turned. Slowly, smoothly, it rotated until it was facing the camera. Facing me through the camera. Then its arm moved. It raised one hand and pointed directly at the camera. At me. I stopped walking. Stood in the hallway, staring at my phone screen. This wasn't possible. Mannequins don't move. They're not alive. But on the screen, all three mannequins were moving now. Not frantically, not like they were attacking, more like they were performing a ritual. Swaying, raising, and lowering arms, shifting position. The bells on the shaman's costume were ringing clearly, audibly through the phone's speaker. I forced myself to keep walking. To go to Gallery 7 and see this for myself. When I entered the gallery, everything was still. The mannequins were in their original positions, arms raised, facing the fake fire. The tape I'd put on the floor was undisturbed. But the tape was warm when I touched it. And there was ash on the floor around the fake fire. Real ash, like something had actually been burned. I checked the security footage later. The video showed exactly what I'd seen on my phone, the mannequins moving, performing what looked like an elaborate ritual. But when I got to the part where I entered the gallery, the mannequins instantly snapped back to their original positions. No gradual movement, just instant repositioning, like someone had pressed a reset button. I showed the footage to Tom the next morning. He watched it, frowning, then shook his head. This has to be a malfunction. Some kind of video glitch. A glitch that shows coordinated movement? That includes sound. Marcus, the alternative is that mannequins are coming to life. That's not possible. There's got to be a technical explanation. I'll have IT look at it. But IT found nothing wrong with the camera or the footage. As far as they could tell, the video was genuine, not edited or corrupted. The museum director, Dr. Carolyn Hayward, called me into her office on my sixth night. She's in her late 50s, sharp and professional, not someone prone to flights of fancy. Marcus, I've reviewed the security footage you flagged. I need to tell you something about the Blackwood collection, something that wasn't included in the public information about the acquisition. She pulled out a file folder, thick with documents. The Blackwood Institute closed not just because of financial problems. There were incidents. 3 security guards quit within a 6-month period, all citing the same gallery. The one that housed the Siberian shamanistic collection. What kind of incidents? Similar to what you're experiencing. Objects moving, sounds, temperature changes. The final straw was when one of the guards claimed he saw the mannequins walking through the museum at night. He had a complete breakdown, ended up hospitalized. After that, the institute couldn't keep staff, couldn't get insurance. They had to close. And you bought the collection anyway. The board thought it was superstition and overworked imaginations. The artifacts themselves are incredibly valuable, both historically and monetarily. We thought in a different environment, with better security systems, there wouldn't be problems. She looked at me seriously. We were wrong. What are those things? The mannequins. The mannequins are just mannequins. But the clothing they're wearing, that's authentic shamanistic ritual gear. According to the documentation from the Blackwood, Those particular items were used in actual spiritual ceremonies by a Siberian shaman named Kaftan in the late 1800s. He was supposedly very powerful, feared and respected by his community. When he died, his ritual items were collected by a Western anthropologist and eventually ended up at the Blackwood. You're saying the clothes are haunted? I'm saying that some cultures believe objects used in spiritual practices retain energy, power. Whether that's literally true or whether there's some other explanation, I don't know. But I can't ignore what's happening. We're going to close Gallery 7 temporarily, remove the diorama, and have the items examined by specialists. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt uneasy. When? Starting tomorrow. We'll close the gallery to the public and begin the process of dismantling the diorama. I'm bringing in a consultant, Dr. Elena Volkov, an expert in Siberian indigenous cultures and spiritual practices. She'll assess the items and advise us on proper handling and storage. That night, my 6th night since Gallery 7 opened, I did my rounds as usual. The gallery was still open, still displaying the diorama. For the last time, I thought. The motion alarm went off at 1:55 a.m. I was almost expecting it. But this time, when I approached Gallery 7, I saw light spilling from the entrance. Not the normal gallery lighting, this was orange and flickering. Like firelight. I entered the gallery and stopped dead. The fake fire was real. Actually, genuinely burning. Flames rose from the center of the diorama, and smoke curled toward the ceiling. The mannequins were standing, not positioned in the display, but standing freely, arranged in a circle around the fire. And they were moving. Not just small movements like before. They were dancing. Swaying and stepping in a coordinated pattern, arms moving through gestures that looked ritualistic and deliberate. The bells on the shaman's costume rang with each movement. The other two were chanting. I could hear voices, though their mouths didn't move. The sounds seemed to come from them but not from them, if that makes sense. I knew I should run. Every instinct screamed at me to get out. But I was frozen, watching this impossible scene unfold. The main shaman figure turned toward me. Its eyes, which had been painted on mannequin eyes, now looked real. Dark and deep and aware. It raised one arm and gestured toward me, not threatening, but beckoning. Inviting. I felt a pull. Not physical, but something deeper. Like the air itself was drawing me toward the circle, toward the fire. I took a step forward. Then my radio crackled. Tom's voice: "Marcus, you copy? We're getting fire alarms from Gallery 7. The spell broke." I gasped, realizing I'd been holding my breath. I grabbed my radio. "Copy, there's a real fire in Gallery 7. Call the fire department." I turned back to the diorama. The fire was still burning, but the mannequins had stopped moving. They were standing still now, all three facing me. Watching. "Get out," I said out loud. "This isn't your place anymore." The shaman figure tilted its head, and I swear I heard a voice in my mind, speaking words I didn't understand but somehow comprehended: "We are where we have always been. You are the intruders." Then, as suddenly as it had started, the fire went out. Not gradually, it just vanished, like someone had flipped a switch. The mannequins collapsed, their bodies falling to the ground in lifeless heaps. The clothes they'd been wearing lay in piles, empty. When Tom and the fire department arrived 5 minutes later, there was no fire. No smoke. No damage. Just the three mannequins lying on the ground in a circle, their ritual clothing scattered around them. And the smell of burning herbs that none of us could identify. Dr. Volkov arrived the next day. She's a woman in her 60s, Russian accent, with the kind of presence that makes you pay attention when she speaks. She spent 2 hours examining the diorama and the ritual items, taking notes, occasionally touching the objects with what looked like reverence. Finally, she called Dr. Hayward, Tom, and me into her temporary office. "These items are sacred," she said without preamble. "Not sacred in the Western religious sense, but in the sense that they are vessels for spiritual power." The shaman who wore these kaftan was not just playing at spirituality. He was a genuine practitioner, someone who devoted his entire life to walking between worlds. Between worlds? Tom asked skeptically. The physical and spiritual. The seen and unseen. Whatever you want to call it. The point is, he imbued these items with his practice, his intention, his power. And when he died, That power didn't dissipate. It remained in the objects. So what do we do? Dr. Hayward asked. You return them, Dr. Volkov said firmly. These items should never have been taken from Siberia in the first place. They belong with Kaftan's people, with practitioners who understand how to properly care for them, how to honor them. Keeping them here, displaying them as curiosities, is deeply disrespectful and, as you've discovered, dangerous. We can't just give away artifacts worth. Dr. Hayward, Volkov interrupted, I have seen what happens when sacred objects are mishandled. I have seen museums burned down, people driven mad, worse things. You are lucky that Kaftan's spirit is merely trying to practice his rituals, to continue his work. He could do far worse if he chose to. Return the items, or I guarantee this will escalate. There was a long silence. Finally, Dr. Hayward nodded. I'll talk to the board. We'll begin repatriation procedures. Over the next 2 weeks, Gallery 7 was dismantled. The ritual items were carefully packed and prepared for return to a community in Siberia that still practiced traditional shamanism. Dr. Volkov oversaw the entire process, performing what she called cleansing rituals as the items were removed. I worked night security through all of it. The motion alarms in Gallery 7 stopped. No more sounds, no more movements, no more sense of presence. It was just an empty room. On the last night before the items were shipped to Russia, I did one final walkthrough of Gallery 7. It was completely bare now, no displays, no artifacts, just empty floor and walls. As I was leaving, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around. No one was there. But I heard that voice again, the one from the night of the fire. It spoke in English this time, accented but clear. Thank you for respecting the old ways. Thank you for letting me go home. The air shimmered, and for just a moment, I saw him. Not the mannequin, but a real man, weathered face, dark eyes, wearing the ritual clothing. He nodded to me once, then faded. I left Gallery 7 and didn't look back. The items were shipped to Siberia 3 days ago. Dr. Volkov went with them, to personally oversee their transfer to the indigenous community. She emailed Dr. Hayward yesterday to say the handover went well, and that the elders performed a ceremony to properly welcome the items home. She said she felt the spirit of Kaftan there, at peace. Gallery 7 is closed indefinitely now. The museum is redesigning it to showcase a different collection, something local, something that won't cause problems. They're being very careful now about where they acquire artifacts, especially religious or spiritual items. As for me, I'm still working night security. Still walking the halls, checking the exhibits, making sure everything is secure. But I don't walk past Gallery 7 anymore. Even though it's empty, even though the artifacts are gone, something about that space still feels different. Heavy. Changed. Last night, on my rounds, I heard drums. Faint, distant, but definitely drums. They weren't coming from Gallery 7, they were coming from Gallery 9, where we keep the Native American collection. I checked the motion sensors. Nothing. I checked the surveillance cameras. Nothing. But I could hear them steady, rhythmic drumming. I radioed Tom. Hey, are we expecting any new artifacts in Gallery 9? Not that I know of. Why? No reason. Just checking. I didn't go into Gallery 9 that night. I stayed in the hallway, listening to the drums, and I thought about Dr. Volkov's words, you are lucky that Kaftan's spirit is merely trying to practice his rituals, to continue his work. How many other artifacts in this museum are sacred? How many other spirits are trying to continue their work? How many objects are we displaying that should never have been taken from their homes? I don't know the answers to those questions. But I know this, museums are full of the dead. Full of objects that once belonged to people who are long gone, cultures that have vanished or changed. We preserve these things in the name of history and education, and maybe that's noble. But sometimes, the dead don't want to be preserved. Sometimes, they want to rest. Or to go home. Or to finish what they started. And sometimes, late at night in the Ashford Museum of Natural History, they try. I've started wearing tobacco in a small pouch on my belt. Dr. Volkov told me it's a traditional offering, a sign of respect to spirits. When I pass the galleries now, especially the ones with indigenous artifacts, I whisper a quiet greeting. I acknowledge the objects, the people they came from, the spirits that might still be attached. It's probably nonsense. It's probably my imagination running wild after the Gallery 7 incident. But the drum stopped after I started doing it. And last night, when I was doing my rounds past the Native American gallery, I felt that same hand on my shoulder. Gentle, brief, thankful. I turned around. No one there. But I could have sworn I heard a voice, barely a whisper, "Good man. I've got 17 years until retirement. 17 more years of walking these halls, surrounded by the accumulated history of human civilization. 17 more years of being alone with the artifacts and whatever spirits might still cling to them. I used to think I had the best job in the world. Now I know I have the most complicated one. But I'm not quitting. Someone needs to be here at night, someone who understands that these objects aren't just things. They're memories. They're connections to the past, they're sacred. Someone needs to walk these halls with respect. Might as well be me. Just don't ask me to work in Gallery 7 again. That room can stay closed.